Hi everyone, what's up? Kwaku here. I'm going to be taking you through our next Life Words video for today. Today we're going to be looking at Mark chapter 11, verses 12 to 19. As always, I'm going to share some thoughts with you around the scripture that you can reflect over while you go ahead and read this passage for yourself. So with all that being said, let's dive right in. Now in this passage of scripture, we see Jesus go out of Jerusalem. You see at the end of Amy's passage, what happens is, after everyone sung their praises and are happy that Jesus came into Jerusalem, he goes into the temple courts. And he looks around and he leaves because it's late with his disciples. Now the next day they're going back into Jerusalem. And on his way there he passes a fig tree. And he curses the fig tree because it doesn't bear any fruit. Now we're not going to go into that too much today because we're going to cover it in our next video. Now, when Jesus and his disciples go back into Jerusalem, Jesus goes into the temple courts. And what he finds there shocks him to the point where he drives out everyone that's in there. You see, what Jesus and his disciples see when they go into the temple courts that causes Jesus to drive everyone out is that people are selling things in the midst of the temple courts. They're selling their merchandise and they're selling doves and animals and all sorts of things. And this makes Jesus angry to the point where he drives everyone out. And then he begins to teach after he's done this. He says, "Is it not written that my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations? But you have turned it into a den of robbers," or in some versions it says a den of thieves. Now, why is Jesus calling these people thieves? What's the big deal if they're selling in the midst of the temple courts? Well, for one, the temple is a holy place. It's a place where people would come to fellowship and meet with God, where they would go to perform prayers and sacrifices as atonement and ask for forgiveness from God, all those sorts of things. And like Jesus says, a house of prayer. So people go to pray and meet with God. But what's happening is that people are selling things in the midst of the temple courts. But not only that, they're selling doves and animals. And the importance of this is that people would need to purchase these animals to perform certain rituals and certain sacrifices so they could be forgiven of their sin. We're not going to go too much into that either, but the thing you need to understand is that what these people are doing by selling these things in the temple courts is they're putting a price on people's salvation, one that they couldn't pay, especially if they were poor. You see, people that would have been able to purchase these animals to perform these rituals and sacrifices would have been the rich and the wealthy and the powerful, people that had the money to afford God's forgiveness. And that's why Jesus says it's a den of robbers. These people are robbing people of the opportunity to meet with God, to be forgiven for their sins, and to be in relationship with a God who loves them. It's funny because in comparison, a lot of us are like those people. We had no way to pay the debt of sin that was on our head. All of us have fallen short of God's perfect standard. None of us are perfect. And there's no way we could pay the price for that, to pay for God's forgiveness. And what he does is sends Jesus to be a perfect sacrifice for our sin, so that we wouldn't have to suffer because of it. And when we choose to believe in Jesus, we receive salvation forever. And we receive God's unconditional love and grace and forgiveness for our sin. That's what's so important, and that's the beautiful thing about this passage, is that it foreshadows all that Jesus is going to do. He's not going to allow this system to be one that oppresses people, to be one that denies people who can't afford to pay for their salvation, because Jesus pays the price for us, so we never have to, so that we can live eternally in a perfect relationship with God because of what Jesus did, so long as we choose to believe and trust in him. Now, I hope you're encouraged by today's passage. Please do go off and read it for yourself. It is a good one. It's one of my favorites. If you have any questions, please do drop something in the comment section so we can see and we can respond to those questions. Alternatively, why don't you go ahead and get in contact with us through our Instagram at NilmYFC or via Facebook or Twitter under the same name, which is NilmYFC. We'd be happy to have a conversation with you about this passage. But that's all from me, so God bless, stay safe, and we'll see you for the next Life Words video.